Okay, so the record button is now on. You are in exactly the right place if you are leading or aspiring to lead. So you're leading in an organization, or you want to do so. Some people on this masterclass have told me, "Hey, I'm not yet in a leadership position, or I'm between leadership positions," and that's why I'm here is to do that even better. And a lot of people, of course, are in leadership positions right now, and this masterclass is directly for you. Also, if you're action oriented, so there's a lot of stuff in leadership that's just in this sort of academic world and not really applicable, if you will, in context. So one of the biggest frustrations people have that they've told me is, look, I go away to these 2-week executive education programs and they're great and I learn a lot and I come back really excited, but then I find out I can't apply any of it because the context is totally different. So you're in the right place if you're action oriented and you want action steps that you can take right away to make things better, to help inspire your employees to contribute their best to your success. If you're facing turbulence and uncertainty, and I think just about all of us are in these wild days of COVID, economic shutdowns, protests against racial injustice, and on top of it, a very high adventure, potentially divisive election. You're in the right place if you're tired of the same lame jargon and hype, stuff that you can't use, nice sounding concepts, or strange sounding buzzwords and concepts that nobody really knows how to implement. So if you're tired of that, you're in the right place too. You are in the right place if you want to do the following. First, so you want to inspire people to contribute their best. I mean, after all, as we'll discuss, that's what leadership is all about. It's not about getting people to do stuff necessarily. It's about inspiring them to contribute their best and most authentic selves to your team's success. You're in the right place if you want to get results the right way. Look, anybody can get results. Anybody with a big enough baseball bat or anybody with whatever coercive tools you can imagine can get results, but it's not getting results the right way. So if you want to get results the right way by inspiring people to contribute their best, in totally aligned with your organization's values and your personal values, then you're in the right spot. You're also in the right place if you want to promote smart innovation and risk taking. I mean, one of the things that things like pandemic and economic uncertainty do is people start becoming very risk averse. People are afraid to innovate. And so we're going to talk about ways to help people get over those and promote smart innovation so your team can continue thriving despite all of this turbulence and uncertainty. You're in the right place if you want to build a diverse winning team. I mean, diversity, the economic case for diversity is very, very clear. People just often don't know how to do it. And so they revert to physical diversity, diversity that you can see, and are missing a key part of diversity, which is cognitive diversity. And when you put those together, your chances of having a winning team go up exponentially. And finally, you're in the right place if you want to regain time for strategy and growth. So many leaders I speak with say that, look, I'm entirely consumed with just supervision. I am entirely consumed making sure people are doing what they're supposed to do. I don't have time for strategy and growth. We're gonna talk about ways that get you out of that trap, so you can now spend time on strategy and growth, knowing that your employees are contributing their best to your team's success. Okay, so here's the game plan for today. I'm going to talk about 3 of my very painful mistakes that I have made along the way. And my goal is that my long and sometimes expensive and painful journey is your shortcut to success and avoiding those same mistakes that I made. Second, we're going to talk about the leadership habits that inspire people to contribute their best. And there's 6 of them. I'm going to give each one to you. We're going to talk about 5 shifts that you can make right now to begin implementing this day one, the minute you step away from this masterclass, and also talk about, hey, here's some next steps to help you make it happen to an even higher level. Okay, so that's game plan. My personal journey, as with most of us, yeah, it's been a roller coaster. Plenty of ups, plenty of downs, and plenty of lessons along the way. And here are a couple of my lessons. The first one is that I had thought that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough to be a leader, and I needed to model or copy others that I looked up to. And I figured that, and everybody's got a bit of imposter syndrome. I figured that if I could impersonate, in this case, people that I respected, that I would get the same level of respect from others. And what I found out was, I tried so hard to be this sort of extroverted character like I saw other people doing. And what it did was it just absolutely wiped me out. I had no idea about these differences between introverts and extroverts. And as I tried to model myself after some others that I respected, it turned out that it just absolutely wiped me out. I came home exhausted at the end of the day, and it affected my relationships. It affected, with family, with friends, etc. And of course, over time, I found out that look, I don't have to try to copycat anybody else. I'm good enough to do this, and don't copycat everybody else because everybody else is taken. So just simply be yourself. And we're going to drill down into that a bit more because it is so fundamental to leading effectively and to leading with the right levels of energy. So you sustain that energy at work, at home, and beyond. You're not burning yourself out like I did early in my career. Okay, the second mistake I made was being results only focused. And early in my career, I, of course, was very competitive, like a lot of people, and we were in a particularly competitive time. And I made very clear the results to my team, the results that I wanted, and that I wanted to win this thing. And they're all rallying behind it. They're very excited about it. They're totally committed to doing the same thing, and things are going really well. And then one of my subordinates cut a corner that he shouldn't have cut. And to make matters even worse, my boss finds out about it before I did. And of course, I got called on the carpet and read the riot act about this corner cutting, which was absolutely unacceptable. And I knew it was unacceptable. And the person who did it knew it was unacceptable. But what he was trying to do was to please me, to please the team. And what I learned from that, and what I've carried from that to this very day, is that you've got to make your expectations clear, and you got to do it both on the results that you want to achieve and the values, the how that you're going to achieve them, or the boundaries in which you are going to achieve them, the behavioral expectations for your team. Because if you just do results only, then highly motivated people are going to feel some pressure, some incentive to cut corners, to do things that might violate the values of your organization. And when that happens and you get an anything goes kind of culture, then things begin to come off the rails. And that person who read me the riot act remains a mentor to this day. And the person who cut the corner never did it again, and remains a friend to this day. So that was mistake number two. What I learned from that is results and values equally important, and you've got to emphasize both. Mistake number three was seeing the world from my foxhole rather than seeing the world from the point of view of the people that I'm serving. And in this case was Afghanistan. So in the summer of 2007, I was commanding about 800 paratroopers in the northeast of Afghanistan, one of the deadliest places in the country. This photo was taken on July 27th of 2007, and those are a couple of 500-pound bombs that were going into insurgent positions. We'd been in the area for about 60 days, and I guess we could be forgiven for not knowing as much of the areas that we should have. We were supposed to have gone to Iraq. Our last minute, our orders gets changed to Afghanistan. The people we replaced were only in that area for a little bit of time. So it was a lot of discovery learning. And those first 60 to 90 days were really ugly and really intense. And we were doing all the things that the book told us to do, that the Army told us to do in terms of doing security and doing patrols, et cetera, and so forth. And things just kept getting worse. And what I found out was that 95% of the people that we thought we were there helping were actually trying to kill us, or were supporting the ones who did. And we recognized that if we just kept doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, expecting people to suddenly turn around and support us, that was just simply foolish. And we would be running around for 15 months through the mountains of Afghanistan and not really accomplishing anything. And so what we said is, look, why don't we try to see ourselves through Afghan eyes? Let's try to figure out, hey, why exactly are all these frictions? Why are people so motivated that they are willing to take up arms or to support those who are in fighting against us? And we found out, as we began to understand their point of view, that most of that 95% were fighting for very practical reasons. And these were practical reasons that we could work together with them to address. And so the more we began to understand their point of view and to work with them for common objections, to find common ground, the more and more people just simply stop fighting. And ultimately, the major insurgent group in that area stopped fighting and later joined the government. And it is, I believe, remains the only example of that in the 20-year history of that war now. And it's thanks to great people like Nathan Springer, who you see on the right, and a lot of Afghans who really partnered with us. And ultimately, because we were able to see things from their point of view, we found common ground. We found ways to work towards common objectives. And about 1,000 insurgents just simply stopped fighting and later joined the government. So you can read more about this actually in Jake Tapper, CNN's Jake Tapper. He's got a New York Times bestselling book called The Outpost. So you can read about that. Our time there is about in the middle of the book. And also, The Outpost has now been made into a movie, and it's the #1 movie in the country. So congratulations to Jake Tapper for that. And I've always appreciated the fact that he has told the stories of our soldiers and the ones who came before us and the ones who came there after us. Okay, so I had every intention of taking this lesson about viewing things from other people's point of view into business when I started business. And one of the things that I wanted to do as a young business leader is to take people on leadership expeditions to places like Normandy and Gettysburg. And I was absolutely convinced, I know how powerful these experiential learning seminars are. And I was convinced that, well, sure, everybody sees this. And so I hired a digital marketing company for about $25,000 to help me really kind of energize this effort. And we put together some really cool videos. And so we have all this together. We had this very complex sales funnel, and we're like, okay, Facebook ads. Let's do Facebook ads because of course everybody is on Facebook. And they will lap up these ads and people will start signing up for these trips. And so we put together these they put these videos on Facebook, and I mean, and and these videos are rocking. All right, we had a reach of nearly 1 million people and nearly 2 million impressions from these videos. We're getting 200,000 likes. I'd spent at that point about $17,000. So when you add the 25K or so for the digital marketing program, I mean, that's an over $40,000 investment. So $40,000 spent, all these really good videos, reaching 1 million people, 250,000 likes, and guess how many people signed up to go with me on a trip to Normandy? That's right, 0, not a single person, because for all sorts of reasons. The first one is most of the ideal clients, people who would be willing to do something like that, want to do something like that, are not just hanging out on Facebook during the day. They're really, really busy people like you. And second, I positioned everything as a nice to do rather than as a must do. So I'm not getting the right people. And of course, the way the Facebook algorithms work, it keeps sending the video to people who are, like military history nerds and not people who are senior leaders. So I'm getting all the impressions, 2 million impressions from people who absolutely weren't going to buy. And what I learned from all of that is just like in places like Afghanistan, business is the empathy is essential. You have got to see things from your client, your customer point of view. Within an organization, you want to see things from the point of view of your employees as well as your bosses. And the more effectively we practice empathy, the better we can serve the people who we're trying to serve. So big lesson there that I learned in a very expensive way. So one of my recent clients, Dustin Smith, actually, recent client, Dustin Smith, that I've gotten to know and love. And Dustin and his company Aspire had asked me to come and do a motivational presentation and to motivate their workforce. And I love doing presentations, but motivational presentation, kind of like the sugar donut. You get the motivational presentation, everybody goes out of there charged up, and it's like eating a sugar donut, because then just a couple hours later or a day later or whatever, you get the crash, people are back to normal. And so I asked him, what are you really trying to achieve? And why does your workforce need to be motivated? And he said, well, they actually love what they do, but what we're not doing is getting them, our providers, more. I want them to be more entrepreneurial. I want them to take more ownership of success and conversion, getting more people into their clinics. Now that we understand that and what you need, it's not really a motivational talk. What you really want to do is you want some sort of workshop that helps them generate ownership. And that's exactly what was going to scratch the itch. And the great thing about it was, after this workshop, the providers felt empowered and had enough skills to be able to take ownership. And so their revenues jumped within the first 6 weeks by about 10%. And what also started to happen is, because those mid-level providers began doing much more in terms of getting people into the clinics, the people in the C-suite had times to focus on strategic challenges, because they're not worried about internal problems and making people do their jobs. So well done, Dustin and company at Aspire. So the aha, of course, and I wrote about this in my book, Leadership, the Warrior's Art, in Afghanistan, in business, it is consistent. You get the big things right. Leadership, culture, and strategy, they're kind of like the legs of a stool. You've got to have all three in place and aligned to have a stable platform for growth. And when you do, really, really good things happen. When one of those legs is missing, however, then of course, things get ugly. So if you are missing the leadership leg, you become like the Titanic, right? So the ship is operating just fine. You've got your route, your game plan to get from London to New York, but you don't have anybody watching out on the horizon. You don't have anybody learning from the environment and making the adaptations. And so you just wind up operating on autopilot, following that game plan right into the iceberg. So you're like, without good leadership that is allowing you to learn and adapt, we become like the Titanic. And there is a really, really good chance that we're going to hit that iceberg. Without culture, without a solid winning culture, we are simply spinning and not winning. So it's kind of like this van that is spinning its wheels in the mud. So the leadership might be ready to make good decisions. You might have a good kind of strategy to get from point A to point B, but then something happened and now your culture, you can't execute. You can't execute that plan. You can't execute the decisions your leaders are making. So you are just spinning, not making any progress because you don't have the kind of culture that can execute your game plan. All right, and stand by. I need to make Nicole a co-host again. So let me do that real quick. She inadvertently dropped off. So quick 10-second pause. Okay, she is good to go. All right, so without culture, you're spinning and not winning. And without solid strategy, you're essentially on a path to nowhere. So you might have leaders that are able to learn and adapt and make great decisions. You may have a culture that allows you to execute all of those decisions to a high standard, but without a strategy, without that sort of azimuth, without a framework to make decisions about the purpose and direction of your organization, you are essentially like this poor person on a path to nowhere. So the key is got to get the big things right. Leadership, culture, and strategy. We're going to drill down on the leadership leg here in just a second. Now, somebody who totally got this was Jim Thaden, my very first client, executive director of the Central Asia Institute. Now, the Central Asia Institute had suffered a public relations disaster. And they had been this organization that started off as a kind of a small $25,000 nonprofit led by a visionary founder. And they were making extraordinary impact in girls' education in Afghanistan and Pakistan. A book called 3 Cups of Tea comes out. And almost overnight, they went from a $25,000 nonprofit to a $25 million nonprofit. But unfortunately, the board of directors at the time did not make sure that the management infrastructure had grown along with the size of the organization, that they were following international best practices of transparency and accountability. And so when people started poking into it, saying, hey, where's all the money going? And they weren't doing, there was no malfeasance, but they couldn't show the trail, then of course things went downhill very fast. The organization went into free fall. Jim Thaden was asked to come in eventually in 2014 to help pull it out of the nosedive. And he recognized that, look, we've got to get the big things right. And he asked me to come give him some support on that. And thanks to Jim's leadership and a new strategy and a lot of energy from him and the team in getting these 3 things right, and a new board that was energized, the organization by 2015 had stabilized, and by 2016 was heading in a positive direction. And so here's what Jim said: our management and governance are now highly integrated. We have very high degrees of engagement and accountability, and a strategy that's created $2 million annually in new revenues. So that's about $8 million in new revenues today, and they continue to thrive. So well done, Jim Thaden. Okay, so of course, all of this is harder than it looks. We know that. Employees, so check this out. Employees who report that they use their strengths, their natural inclinations every day are 2 to 3 times more productive than those who don't. So it seems like a no-brainer. We just get people doing the things that they are good at doing. But you know what? 67% of Americans, now this is pre-COVID, according to Gallup, pre-COVID, 67% of Americans report being unengaged at work. That means 2 out of every 3 Americans are spending most of their work time doing something other than what they say is being productive. So that could be goofing off, could be on social media, but it could be things like, spinning their wheels in meetings, doing rework because, they're become victims of the good idea fairy, et cetera, and so forth. 2/3 of Americans say they're unengaged at work pre-COVID. Might be worse now. 75% of Americans, according to Gallup, who leave their jobs voluntarily report that they did so to get away from their managers. So their managers, a sort of toxic or neglectful or unfulfilling work environment, are motivating 2 out of every 3 people who leave to get away from their managers. Ouch. Employee turnover. So the big deal in this is that employee turnover costs anywhere between 50 and 200% of that employee's annual salary. And of course, the more senior that employee is, the closer to 200% that it gets. So if you have a turnover rate that is higher than 8%, it's probably too high. Now, if you have a turnover rate that is below 8%, you might be finding that you don't have enough sort of fresh new ideas in the organization. You might find that the organization is at risk of becoming stale. 8% is about healthy. But let's say just to make the math easy, that you have 10 people who left your organization, and that was 10 more people who left than you wanted. Their average annual salary was $100,000. Well, the replacement costs for those 10 people, when you factor in the recruiting, the revetting, the vetting, the onboarding, the training, the lost momentum, the cost to your organization of losing those 10 people that you didn't want to lose, whose salary is an average of $100,000, is $1 million. That's $1 million just right down the drain. No way to recover it. So hiring the right folks and keeping them engaged and keeping them fulfilled and contributing to your team's success, absolutely essential, or we pay the penalties. 90% of business strategies are not executed successfully. Oh my goodness. Organizations spend inordinate amounts of money on these strategic plans, and 90% of them are not executed successfully. Now, of course, the consultants will say, well, you didn't execute our plan successfully, and therefore it's your fault that it didn't work. But of course, oftentimes when we outsource strategy to consultants, then the consultants write something that only the consultants can understand, and nobody else knows how to execute. And so this is part of the self-licking ice cream cone of these strategic plans and strategic planners, and why so many strategies are not executed successfully. So imagine the power if we could turn those numbers around. And good leadership, of course, is the most important ingredient in doing that. So let's drill down in that. Success all starts with leadership. There's a lot of definitions of leadership out there. The Army says leadership is about a process of providing purpose, direction, and motivation. There are all sorts of definitions that talk about, getting results, getting people to get results, getting people to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily otherwise do. And, those definitions are not awful, but they don't differentiate between leadership and coercion. So you can provide a lot of purpose and direction and motivation with the right coercive tools. You can get people to do what they wouldn't otherwise do on their own with a lot of coercive tools. But those coercive tools also come at huge costs because people just do the minimum to avoid the coercion. They are not taking the initiative. They are not taking risks. They are not doing what's right, even when nobody is watching, when you have to rely on coercion to get results. So leadership is not about coercion. Leadership is different. Leadership is about inspiring people to contribute their best and most authentic selves to your team's success. So breaking that down, it's about people wanting to do this, wanting to contribute their best, being in a position to contribute their best, and knowing the why, knowing what your goals and your mission and vision and strategy of your team, so they know exactly what they need to do, even when they're not told, to contribute their best and most authentic selves to what you're defining as your team's success. So let's break this down a little bit further. There are 6 habits that we talk about at Strategic Leaders Academy for leading well. So we're going to go up the leadership leg of the stool. The first one is authenticity, being the best version of yourself, helping your employees be the best versions of themselves, and not trying to copycat somebody else, and not, as we'll talk about, creating mini-me's so your employees act just like you. Second is trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship, what we call the 3 principles of leadership. Trustworthiness, being worthy of trust. That's what we as leaders have to do. We have to be worthy of trust in our character and our competence. Respect, treating people with respect as and dignity that all human as morally equal human beings. And then stewardship, leaving the organization better and more sustainable than you found it. Empathy. We talked a little bit about empathy earlier. Empathy is different than sympathy, right? Sympathy means that you see somebody else's point of view and you adopt it. Empathy means you see some point, you understand the other person's point of view, you understand their perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean that you adopt it, but you understand it. And because you understand it, you can then find common ground. Wouldn't that be nice to have in more of in America today? Okay, the fourth one is responsibility. So taking responsibility is absolutely essential for innovation, because nobody's going to take any risk. Nobody's going to innovate if they feel that they're going to get thrown under the bus if it doesn't go right. So leaders taking responsibility for everything that happens and fails to happen in their organization, passing the credit to their subordinates for successes, taking on the criticism or being on the blame line if things don't go right, and then holding people accountable for results and values is how you create an environment in which people are willing to take risks, people are willing to innovate, and doing so because they trust that you are not going to throw them under the bus. Okay, the fifth one is your why. So understanding the mission, vision, goals, and values. The more people understand why, the more likely it is, and when they get buy-in, and once they get buy-in, they're going to do what's right even when nobody is watching. That's how you liberate your time as a leader. And then finally, the last one is learning, and learning is not about sort of book learning or nerd learning. It's about application, conditioning, and accountability. Applying what you learn to every day, what you're doing every day. Condition, getting the repetition so you do it well, and the accountability to stay on track. And when you got those 6 things in place, there's magic that's happening. You are going to inspire people to contribute their best to your team's success. Okay, so quick self-check. Here's what happens when something is missing. So I've put those 6 along the top, and if you got all 6, then you have success. Excuse me, I'll take a sip of green tea. If you are missing authenticity, then you get like I got early in my career, you get burnout. right? Because you are spending all sorts of energy trying to be somebody who you are not. Without trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship, you get a toxic work environment. You get what you might call chicken shit. And if you were on my email list as of a couple of days ago, you saw that definition from historian Paul Fussell in the Second World War. But chicken shit is all, all of these things wrapped up, the combination of silly power plays and treating people poorly, bigotry, misogyny, etc., all sort of wrapped up in this problem. So if you don't have trustworthiness, if you don't treat people with respect, you get a toxic culture and full of chicken shit kind of behavior. Without empathy, then you have high risk of being blindsided by things that you just simply didn't anticipate. If you don't have responsibility, if leaders don't take responsibility, and people don't trust that they're not going to get thrown under the bus, then you get just a very risk-averse environment. Nobody's going to want to poke their heads up because they realize that actually your survival skill is going along, getting along, not drawing too much attention to yourself. And that's how you get promoted, because everybody who did draw attention to themselves and innovated and something went wrong, got their heads lopped off, boom, they are no longer in the organization. And so this sort of perseverance survival skill just creates a culture of mediocrity. Without understanding the why in terms of mission, vision, goals, values, then your organization becomes like a rental car, right? Nobody ever washes a rental car. You use a rental car and then you give it back. And employees, if our employees treat our organizations like rental cars, they will just use it until it's no longer useful. They will just use it until they find a better opportunity elsewhere and then go. But if people have ownership because they have buy-in to the why, then they're no longer going to treat your organization as a rental car. They're going to treat it as a car that they own and take care of it. And they're going to do the right things without anybody watching. And then finally, without learning, without application, conditioning, and accountability, you get institutionalized incompetence. There are some organizations that can just survive on experience alone because there's no competition. What they're doing is very easy, and they just do the same thing over and over again and expect the same results. But if you are in an organization that faces any form of competition, any form of uncertainty, any form of turbulence, then lack of applied learning guarantees that you're going to make bad decisions and that you are and that your organization is going to be incompetent. Okay, so in the chat room, which of these 6 elements do you find most interesting to you? So just go ahead and type in the chat, which of these 6 elements do you find just simply most interesting? And Nicole, let us know what you see when the chat begins populating.
Sure, Chris. Peter said learning, Tom, the why, Robert, burnout. I said empathy, as did Barbara Jean.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk a bit more about these and some shifts that we can make to get after this. So here are 5 shifts that we can make to inspire people's best. First one is we're going to go from a single leadership ideal to 4 leader archetypes. Second, we're going to go from the concept of assigned seats to the concept of aligned seats. Third, moving from being a cloner to being a coach. Fourth, from the what and the how to the what and the why. And fifth, from being hands-on leader to being eyes-on and hands-off. Okay, so the first shift is from going from a single leader ideal to 4 archetypes. And this is going to emphasize the habits of authenticity, trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship, and learning, application, conditioning, and accountability. So, of course, the problem when we just believe that everybody has to conform to a single leadership ideal is that it only appeals to a very small segment of the population. In fact, that single leadership ideal tends to be very idiosyncratic because we are successful and high performing people. If we embrace the idea that there's a single leadership ideal, we probably also assume subconsciously that we are it. And if we can make more people like us, they will be successful like we are. Well, the issue is that it only works for a fraction of the population who are actually like you. One of the challenges in America today is this sort of visionary extrovert ideal that, oh, if you're going to be a great leader, you've got to be a visionary extrovert. Well, it's just not true. Visionary extroverts are not necessarily good leaders. I'm told this is the math symbol for not necessarily equal. So visionary extroverts do not necessarily equal good leaders, and good leaders are not necessarily visionary extroverts. You have great leaders who are detail oriented as opposed to vision oriented or idea oriented. You have great leaders who are introverts. You have great leaders who are extroverts. And there are actually, four main archetypes we'll talk about here in just a second. All can be great leaders, all can be average leaders, all can be rotten leaders. But when we try to make everybody a visionary extrovert, we are burning out 75% of the population and pushing them away. And when people are burned out, of course, they get poor results. So it all begins with this idea of authenticity. And what do I mean by that? Well, authenticity is an intersection of our who, how we're hardwired as leaders, our how, our principles and values that are important to us, the principles and values that we use to make decisions, and our why, our compelling sense of purpose. And when you are operating at the intersection of your who, your how, and your why, you are operating with authenticity. And you are never going to burn out because you are absolutely loving and feel compelled by what you are doing, and it never grows old. And you know what? People know when we're operating with authenticity and when we're faking it. Our subordinates always know because they can see it. Okay, so let's go from a single ideal to four archetypes. I mean, the fact that there's no single leadership ideal, I can show you in four pictures. The first picture, somebody who's changed the world, Oprah Winfrey. She has changed the world by rallying millions and millions of people across the globe behind the ideas of social justice. Abraham Lincoln changed the world in a positive way by his ability to build a team of rivals, to create this cognitively diverse team and use that to hold the Union together during the Civil War, to put an end to slavery in America, to eventually win the Civil War and set the foundations for the country to come together again afterwards. Queen Elizabeth has changed the world by being somebody who holds people accountable, has extraordinarily high standards, and holds people accountable for results and results the right way. And as a result, during her reign, she has been able to steer Great Britain through some extraordinarily difficult times. I mean, think about it. Post-World War II, decolonization, the Iron Curtain, the Cold War, nuclear armament, the death of Princess Diana, post 9/11, Brexit, Megxit, and through it all, Queen Elizabeth has been the steady hand on the helm, one of the most respected people in the world today. And finally, Steve Jobs, completely different than the other three, a visionary who said, you know what? I'm going to change the world because I'm going to figure out how to put digital technology into the hands of ordinary people like you and me. And he created Apple. And although there are some bumps on the road after that for Jobs, basically the rest is history. Many of us use iPhones. I'm delivering this on a Mac. Steve Jobs has changed the world through his vision of how to solve the complex, wicked problem of putting information technology into the hands of everyday people. For people here who have changed the world, 4 who have done it so in fundamentally different ways because they are 4 fundamentally different kinds of people. That alone, those 4 pictures alone suggest that there is not a single leadership ideal that everybody's got to conform to. In fact, what we did is we got kind of seized by this idea. So, you know what, let's kind of pick this apart. How is it that people are hardwired so we can better understand basic archetypes? And once you understand basic archetypes, then you can help people be the best versions of themselves. So we looked at what are some of the most compelling ways leaders are hardwired. And one of those you'll see on the north-south axis is introverts and extroverts. Where are you at on that scale? And on the east-west axis are people who are detail-oriented versus people who are like big ideas or vision-oriented. And when you put those together, you get 4 very interesting leader types, which we call PROM. And you'll see why we call it PROM in just a second. So pioneers are the kinds of people that rally scores and scores of other people behind new ideas and new innovations. They tend to be visionary extroverts. People who are detail-oriented extroverts tend to be what we call reconcilers. So reconcilers are the great team builders, the people who can build and maintain consensus, who can bring all sorts of different ideas and thoughts and personalities and bring them together for a common cause. Detail-oriented introverts, however, tend to be what we call operators. Now, operators are masters at getting the job done. They nail the details. They hold people accountable. They synchronize complex operations. They're the ones who implement and get stuff done. My wife, Nicole Kaus, is an operator, and she is the one that gets stuff done. Mavericks tend to be visionary introverts, the people who love to solve complex, wicked problems and change the world by doing that. And they're the ones who come up with the innovative, very insightful, game-changing kind of strategies. So those are the 4 different archetypes. And here's what the 4 personalities. So Oprah Winfrey, of course, the pioneer, rallying millions of people behind new ideas and innovations. Abraham Lincoln, the classic reconciler, his team of rivals holding the Union together to be successful. Queen Elizabeth is your operator, detail-oriented, extremely high standards of accountability. And Steve Jobs, your maverick, solving complex, wicked problems. Now, good leaders come in all 4 types. So do average leaders. So do, quite frankly, perfectly rotten leaders. So the key is to know your PROM. And I've sent everybody an email so you can take our very simple 8 question self-test. It'll take you about 2 minutes to take. And it will let you know, based on your answers, what your archetype is. And you'll notice I emphasize tends to be, because some people might answer as a pioneer, for instance, but actually when they read more about the archetype, they say, I'm actually more of a reconciler, or, I'm actually a bit more of a maverick. And so know your PROM, and then, opt into the follow-up emails, and also read our ebook, which you're going to get at the end of this, and you'll be able to really nail which one you are most like. And then second is use that to be your best self. And in our ebook, we talk about the healthy habits of each archetype, the average habits, and the unhealthy habits. And so what you want to do is accentuate the healthy habits and prune away the average or unhealthy habits that might be holding you back. Okay, so that was shift number 1. Shift number 2 is going from the idea of assigned seats, just putting people into jobs, to aligned seats, customizing their jobs to their PROM archetype, to their superpowers. These archetypes help you identify your superpowers. And so aligned seats is all about customizing, fitting those seats to your superpowers. So that's a bit about authenticity, also about trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship, and about empathy. So here's the problem with assigned seats. Just putting people into jobs without any consideration of what their natural inclination, what their natural superpowers might be. So, I mean, just think about a soul sucking job or task that you've had in the past. And, it might be a job that you did very, very well at, or a task that you could do well at. It's nothing to do about strengths and weaknesses. It's just about something that you found tedious or soul sucking, taking you away from stuff that you really wanted to do, where your natural contributions are. So think about that soul sucking job or soul sucking task. And in the chat room, just let us know, hey, how did that job make you feel? How did that soul sucking job or soul sucking set of tasks make you feel? So just put it in the chat room. How did that make you feel? How does it feel having a soul-sucking job or task? How does that make you feel? We've all had them. Nicole, what are you seeing in the chat room?
Well, Marianne said that it made her feel awful. Peter, unappreciated. Tom, exhausted and humiliated. Soul sucking, very demotivated. That's definitely how I felt too, and just very draining. Mashid said drained and undervalued. Claire, exhausted. Jeff, yep, exhausted again. And Barbara, it just takes the life out of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we just cram people into jobs without consideration of their PROM archetype, their superpowers, that's exactly how people feel, because we feel the same way. It's not that you can't do the job. It has nothing to do with strengths and weaknesses. It just means it wears you out. You burn out faster. You're using more energy when we do things that are misaligned with our natural inclinations, aka superpowers. The Air Force figured this out. Very interestingly, in the 1950s, as you're getting higher and higher performance aircraft, they noted the seats for the pilots were made one size fits all. So it didn't matter if you were 4'11" or 6'10", you sat in the same seat. It didn't matter if you were 110 pounds soaking wet or 250 pounds of rolled muscle. You were in the same exact seat. Everybody had the same exact seat. And one of the things that the Air Force began to notice was that if you were anything outside of a very narrow height weight, that that the pilots began losing control of the airplane, began underperforming as pilots during various maneuvers. And the problem is that they kept sliding around in their seats. And it was harder and harder for them, because they're sliding around, because they're not comfortable. It's harder and harder for them to maintain the concentration on all the variables that they've got to do. And I know that we've got at least one person in here who knows what it's like to fly high performance fighter aircraft. And so what the Air Force figured out was, hey, look, instead of making everybody sit in a one size fits all seat, what we need to do is we need to custom fit the seats to the pilots. I mean, what a revolutionary idea. And bam, once they did that, pilot performance skyrocketed, because now everybody, had a pilot seat that was customized to them. And so they could do all of they could do all the things that they needed to do as a pilot, and not spend the extra, the additional energy, not burn out while they're doing it, because the seat was customized to them. That's the exact same principle for us. We've got to custom fit the jobs to people's archetypes. So yeah, there you go. Design it for individual fit, and people are going to thrive. They're gonna have more energy. They're gonna have less burnout, and they are going to stay more engaged when that job is custom fit for them. All right, so assign seats to align seats. Check this out. Think about a job or a task that you have done in the past, or maybe that you're doing now. Think about a job or a task that uses your superpowers, that uses your natural inclinations, where you feel like, you know what, I am completely in the zone and I'm making a huge impact. So think about that job or task. And in the chat room, let us know, how do you feel? How do you feel when you are in that kind of role, when you're in that kind of position, where you're using your superpowers, your natural inclinations to make an impact? How does that feel in the chat room? All right, so Nicole, what do you see? How do people feel when they're using their superpowers?
Yeah, they feel motivated. Peter said motivated. Jeff, kick-ass. Robert, engaged, creative. Time goes by quickly. Tom, valued and proud of his contributions. Barbara, Jean, exhilaration. I also said empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine how our direct reports, how our employees feel when you put them in a position where they're using their superpowers every day. And that is, you already know the answer to that. And it's exactly why people who are using their natural inclinations every day are 2 to 3 times more productive than those who don't. And so it's all about getting custom fit in these seats. So let's talk about how to do that. All right. So if you've got somebody who is a pioneer, hey, let them be like Oprah. Give them challenge, give them opportunities to innovate, give them opportunities to challenge the status quo, give them opportunities to develop new tactics to get you to where you want to be. And if you do that with pioneers, they are absolutely going to thrive. If you've got reconcilers on your team, put them in roles, put them in a position where they are able to build teams, where they are able to build consensus, where they're able to resolve disputes between people who are well-meaning and committed to the same thing, but they just see it from different points of view. Your reconcilers are going to figure that out and how to bring people together in a consensus on a team. Let your reconcilers do those kind of things. If you've got operators on your team, put them in a position where they're nailing the details, where they are coordinating and synchronizing the complex or complicated stuff that you are doing at work and holding people accountable. They will crush it. And if you've got people like Steve Jobs, the Mavericks, put them in a position where they're solving complex, wicked problems. Challenge them to help you and your organization get the big ideas right, and create strategies that allow you to achieve the vision and goals that you're aiming for. So when we customize people's jobs and we custom fit their jobs to their superpowers, boom, we get extraordinary levels of engagement and productivity. We get people who are going to do the right things, who are going to do their job, who are going to power our success, and we don't even have to watch them. They're going to do it without anybody watching. All right, so in the chat, which of these 4 archetypes best fits you? So which of these 4 archetypes do you see best fits you? So in the chat, just let us know. Is your best fit a pioneer, a reconciler, operator, or maverick?
So far, we have all operators and mavericks, which is really interesting.
Yeah, well, it is very interesting. And I think, quite frankly, that introverts are actually often more interested in doing master classes like this. So we often see mainly operators and mavericks. And the great thing is that introversion or extroversion has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of your leadership, nothing whatsoever. Great leaders come in all 4 types. And so once you know that, and once you know your archetype, you get the healthy You can accentuate the healthy habits, prune away those that are holding you back. The ebook that you get at the end of this is going to tell you exactly how to do that. Okay, so third shift is moving from cloner to coach. And this is all about trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship, empathy, and responsibility. So, I mean, here's the problem with the cloning approach. So the cloning approach is, let's say I am a pioneer, a visionary extrovert. When we give our employees feedback, we tend to give them feedback that subtly or overtly encourages them to be more like us, the visionary extrovert, the pioneer. Why? And it's all for the best of intentions. Hey, I'm successful. I'm a visionary extrovert. And I want to help you be successful. So I'm going to encourage you to be more like me. And the problem is it's like trying to turn a banana into a tomato or vice versa. It's not going to happen. And what you wind up doing is you wind up turning off, pushing away 3 out of every 4 people that you come in contact with. And the other thing that it does when we do this, when we take this sort of clone or mini-me approach to hiring, to promoting, to feedback, is because we're pushing, in this case, the reconcilers, the operators, and the mavericks away, what we wind up doing is the people who stay in the organization are the ones who look, think, and act like we do. And that's why you get such a lack of diversity oftentimes in big organizations. When you look at the military, you tend to have very detail-oriented people at the highest ranks of the military, the same way in big corporations. Why? Because, people were successful not rocking the boat. People were successful just implementing and getting the details right. And the people with the big ideas often get washed out. So this is part of the reason why, if we're not very careful with this, we wind up pushing people away, and we wind up just having a very non-diverse group of people around us. And of course, that leads to all sorts of blind sides and many, many problems. And of course, it's going to damage the performance of the people who are turned off and by your feedback. So now that you know the PROM, you know that, look, don't try to turn Steve Jobs into Abraham Lincoln, because it's not going to work. That's not the kind of leader Steve Jobs is. And even if he puts tons and tons of energy into trying to be like Abraham Lincoln, Steve Jobs is going to burn out. And it's the same way from the other direction. Don't try to turn Abraham Lincoln into Steve Jobs. Abe, tell us how you're going to harness, all of these technological innovations to make the world a better place. That's just not what Lincoln does. It's not his superpowers. And he could spend an inordinate amount of energy trying to figure out, but he's going to burn out. So let Steve Jobs be Steve Jobs. Let Abraham Lincoln be Abraham Lincoln. And in fact, put them in positions where Jobs is Jobs and Lincoln is Lincoln. And they are going to rock the world. Okay, so Stan McChrystal, my former boss in Afghanistan, General Stan McChrystal, and my mentor, talks about leaders being gardeners. And what do gardeners do? Gardeners help each thing they are cultivating be the best version of itself. And that's what coaches, that's what leaders are all about. Helping everybody on your team be the best and most authentic versions of themselves. A gardener will never try to turn a banana into a tomato or a cucumber into a jalapeno. The gardener will help that everything that they're cultivating be the absolute best version of itself. And that's what McChrystal talks about. Great example of this is one of my lifetime clients, NFL defensive coordinator Greg Williams. Last year, he had so many injuries. All of his top defensive players were injured, except for one. And so he had, of his 11-person on the field roster, 10 of those were people who were undrafted, who were people that were maybe low round picks. And you know what? Williams said, hey, what I have got to do is I've got to help everybody be the best versions of themselves. And I'm going to put them in a position where they can use their natural strengths, their superpowers to succeed. And my job is to put that together as a team. And what Williams accomplished was the #1 run defense in the league last year, the #7 overall defense in the league last year, using players, except for one, using players that other people had rejected. An extraordinary example of a coach who put people in the right position so they could succeed as the best and most authentic selves and contribute to this team's success. We'll see how they do this year. Okay, so the bottom line is let jobs be the best version of jobs. And the same with Lincoln, and the same with Oprah, and the same with Queen Elizabeth. Okay, so here's an example of why this matters organizationally, if we haven't convinced you enough already. Google in the 1990s was led by two visionary founders, Larry Page, a maverick, Sergey Brin, a pioneer. And they were coming up, they were getting people all sorts of pumped about the information technology ideas that Google was coming up with, and that these two were coming up with. Extraordinary. But by the late 1990s, the venture capitalists, the investors, noticed that these two are making some really horrible business decisions, and they couldn't make any money. And finally, the investors got frustrated and said, look, you two need to bring on somebody who can actually run this business, start making money. All right, it's not just about generating good ideas. You guys are killing yourselves in the tyranny of good ideas. Get somebody who can implement the best stuff. And so they finally relented, and they brought on Eric Schmidt as the CEO, who's a reconciler, John Rosenberg as the senior vice president, who's an operator, and the rest is history. Facebook, also interesting example. Mark Zuckerberg, the pioneer, right? Creates the social network, Facebook. And if you've seen the movie Social Network, you see some of the challenges that Mark Zuckerberg went through when he didn't have a diverse team around, where he just put people around him that looked, thought, and acted like him. And Zuckerberg eventually got this. He said, you know what? What I need to do is I need to bring somebody on who is going to get the details right, who is going to be able to institutionalize this and make it work so we can scale, and is going to hold people accountable along the way. And so who do you bring on? Boom, Sheryl Sandberg, your classic operator. And, you know, those two have formed this sort of dynamic duo that has made Facebook into one of the most successful companies on the planet. Okay, so more shifts in action. My mentor, former boss, and now lifetime client, Michelle Flournoy, who is the CEO of an organization called West Exec. She might wind up being the next Secretary of Defense. We'll have to see how things go. She was, oops, let me take that off. So I actually took her and a board of directors of an organization to Normandy. And she said, you know, Chris, and we talked about these different leader archetypes and how, you know, Eisenhower's a reconciler, Patton's a pioneer, and how Eisenhower very deliberately built this cognitively diverse team. They weren't physically diverse. They were cognitively diverse, though. How he built that and how he helped bring out the best in each one of these very different personalities. And what Michelle said is, hey, these leader archetypes, she wanted to do the same thing in her organization. And she said, you know what, Chris, I always knew intuitively that people led differently, that there was no single leader archetype. But what this has done is it's given me a language and a framework that I can talk about this within my organization, and we can allow people to lead differently. We can bring out their best and focus on channeling that in a commitment to a common culture and common success. And she said it just immediately benefited their retention, engagement, and morale. Another example, Christine Smith, who is somebody who is building her organization. So she is she is launching a really great social enterprise called Kazana. And she, came for support, joined our reemergence program because she wanted to kind of nail these next 100 days. And she wanted to figure out, how do I, not only how do I get a clear path moving forward, but how do I bring the right people around me? Um, and um, and so the clarity and focus that she got from this work together helped her knock down the right barriers, and also crucially helped her bring on the exact right people, surround herself with the exact right people so she could be successful. And I am so excited, Christine, for how Kazana is going to thrive here over the next year. So very well done. All right, shift number 4, going from what and how to the what and why. And that's trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship. You see that every time. Why? Because those are core principles of leadership. Responsibility, and of course, the why, your mission, vision, goals, and values. So let's talk about this shift. So oftentimes, especially in the last several decades, leaders have tended to focus on the what and how. Here's what I want you to do. Here's how I want you to do it. And then I'm going to spend my time making sure you're doing what I want you to do and how I want you to do it. So it's a very sort of compliance-oriented approach. Making sure that people suck the egg exactly the right way. It increases your supervisory demands, right? Because you have got to make sure that everybody is doing exactly what you want them to do and how you want them to do it. People haven't cared to create the buy-in too often. And so when there's no buy-in, you get low initiative. When there's no buy-in, you get higher levels of frustrations. People say, there's a better way to do this, but I'm stuck, I'm handcuffed having to do it this specific way. And if I don't, then Nicole's going to whack me over the head, with a ruler. And so you get high levels of frustration with a what and how focus in the absence of a why. A classic example of this, thanks to Jeff Marquez, one of our franchisees at Strategic Leaders Academy, sent this great article about the Choluteca Bridge in Honduras. Classic example of a what and how focus. And you can imagine at some point, somebody says, you know what? We need to build a bridge over this river. Here's exactly how you're going to do it. And I expect to get it done. And they did it. But what they didn't do was to look at the fact that, rains, which you get a lot in Honduras, flooding is going to change the path of the rivers. And so they built the bridge without the bigger why. Hey, we need to be able to get from one side, we need to connect this part of Honduras with the other part of Honduras, and we need to do it. We need to do it durably so it withstands these challenges. So it would have been much more than a bridge that they needed because of the historic flooding and shifting of the rivers. But they didn't do it. They focused on the what and the how in the absence of the why. And here's what you get: a bridge literally in the middle of nowhere to nowhere. So we don't want that to happen, of course. We need to talk about why. And people say, Chris, the why, that's such a millennial thing. These people the millennials drive me nuts. And Gen Zers drive me nuts. Why? I want to know why. Well, you know what? The why isn't really a millennial thing. It's a millennium thing. Because great leaders across millennium have focused on the why to create buy-in. Great example of this, 2,300 and some odd years, 350 plus years ago today, Alexander the Great. And there's a chapter on this in my book, Leadership, the Warrior's Art. Alexander the Great understood the power of why. And he understood as a young king, he needed to create buy-in from all of these very powerful nobles around him. And one of the things he needed to create buy-in for was putting an end to the threat of the Persian Empire. So Alexander convinced them of the why to do that. And this Greek army crosses the Hellespont near what's today just south of Istanbul. And there's this big battle of Granicus. And Alexander and his Macedonians and Greek allies, they win. And Alexander's general said, okay, Alexander, great victory. You did good. And we all did good. Let's go back to Greece. And Alexander said, now, not so fast. We can't do that because the Persians are just simply going to come back. We have got to throw them out of Asia Minor, create this buffer zone so they can't attack us again so easily. And so they drove on through Asia Minor. En route, Alexander cut the Gordian knot in that place called Gordium, which you see in the middle of what's today Turkey. And then, boom, there was another big battle at Issus, another sort of cataclysmic battle. And the Greeks, Alexander and his team, win again, resounding victory. And his general said, hey, Alexander, all right, that was awesome. We really shellacked the Persians this time. They're not coming back anytime soon. It's time to go home to our families. And Alexander said, not so fast. Actually, what we need to do is we need to eliminate the naval threat to Greece as well for us to be fully secure. And so they actually traipsed all the way down into Egypt. Alexander spent some time at the Temple of Zeus in Ammon and got some guidance reportedly from the Greek god Zeus. And then they continued to drive on all the way. And he said, we actually need to end the Persian threat for good. And so another big battle at Arbela. Alexander's team win again. And his general said, Alexander, we got to go back. We're done. High five. We did this well. And he said, no, until we sack Persepolis, the Persian capital, we can't because they're going to want revenge. We got to keep going. And so he convinces them. They agree. They sack Persepolis. And then, you know the story. I want to go back. Alexander says, no, here's why we need to continue driving on to the ocean, what he called it. And that way we're totally secure, all this wealth for our families. And they made it all the way to what is today the Indus River Valley. Another big battle. Alexander and his team win. And Alexander says, we need to go on. And his people say, Alexander, no, not this time. We can't go on. It's time to go back. And there's this fascinating story in the ancient sources about this conversation between Alexander and his commanders, because Alexander's trying to convince them of why we need to keep driving on to the to the ocean, which always seemed to be across the next river or mountain valley. And one of his commanders says, Alexander, you either have to convince us to go on, and if you do, we'll go on. But if you can't convince us to go on, then we have to turn back. But of course, if you order us to go, if you force us to go, then we'll go. And it was an absolutely brilliant way of putting it, because what he said is, Alexander, if you're going to actually lead, then as a leader, you have to convince us. But if you force us like a tyrant to go, we'll go. But just recognize that you're no longer leading. You're a tyrant. And Alexander recognized the right of it, and he turned back. And also, so even for Alexander, 2,500 years ago, ish, 2,350 some odd years ago, he understood the power of why. And great leaders throughout history always focused on the why. That's how they created buy-in. Colleen Creighton is a great example of this, the executive director of a suicide prevention nonprofit called the American Association of Suicidology. Colleen had taken over an organization that was kind of flatlining, had not grown, and in fact had become such a zombie that they were really at risk, as she found out. And so we began working together on a new strategy, and also to get greater buy-in and greater initiative from her employees. And Colleen absolutely worked this magic. And after about 6 months of getting them fully engaged in a new strategy and a new game plan, she said, our employee engagement actually doubled because people had buy-in. And after just a few months, they were $100,000 in revenue ahead of where they were the previous year. And Colleen has continued to take that organization to new heights. So awesome. Okay, the last shift is going from hands-on to hands or eyes on, hands off. And those are the habits that this habit or this shift emphasizes. So look, here's the problem with the hands-on approach is that the leader is the LIMFAC, which is a great military acronym for limiting factor. As a leader, if you have a hands-on approach, the limiting factor is how many hands you can keep on simultaneously. So you, as a leader, become the limiting factor in your organization. You, as a hands-on leader, are the one that is holding your organization back because you are the limiting factor. So part of the challenge is that the style that leaders pick can be very self-limiting. So let's talk a little bit about styles. I love quad charts. So there are 4 major leadership styles. We talked about the leader archetypes. There are 4 different styles for how those archetypes practice. So some people practice a very sort of people-oriented leadership style. Others are very task-oriented. Some rely on extrinsic motivation, external motivation, carrots and sticks. Others create buy-in, right? Get people intrinsically motivated to contribute. This creates the 4 major styles. So charismatic leaders rely on extrinsic motivation. They want people to follow them because of their own personal magnetism. Task-oriented extrinsic motivation leaders are what we call transactional. So they rely on carrots and sticks to get stuff done. Those who want to bring out their best in their people and create intrinsic motivation to the company's organization success that's what servant leadership is all about. Bringing out people's best to contribute to the organization's success. And those who look to make people's tasks as easy and intuitive and oriented on objectives as possible. And creating that intrinsic motivation, that buy-in from people are transformational leaders. Now, of course, if you are on the left-hand side of the north-south axis, you are the hands-on leader. Whether you're charismatic, it's all about you and your personality, or transaction, it's all about carrots and sticks. Ultimately, this is a hands-on style. It's a low-trust environment because you're only doing what the leader says and how the leader says to do it. It's very sort of leader focused. You've got to have intense supervision, compliance, etc. Whereas if you are promoting buy-in and intrinsic motivation, like servant and transformational leaders do, this is your eyes on, hands off. And you can do that because people when they're intrinsically motivated, are going to do the right thing even when no one's watching. So this creates the high trust environment because it's purpose focused, and this is what allows you to keep high eyes on, but to put your hands on growth and strategy. This alone is going to save you an extraordinary amount of time. And as we develop leaders, we want leaders more and more to be the kinds of people that are creating buy-in and intrinsic motivation. So leaders can focus on what leaders need to do while your employees are doing the right thing when nobody's watching. Okay, so how does that relate to the different archetypes? Well, each archetype can practice any of the 4 styles. So if you're a pioneer, you can practice any style. If you're a reconciler, practice any style. Operator, maverick. The choice of style is yours. And if you're the kind of leader who wants to help everybody, inspire people to contribute their best to your team's success, if you want intrinsic motivation, if you want people to do what's right even when no one's watching, you've got to create buy-in. And creating buy-in is all about being a servant or a transformational leader. Okay, so here's some action steps that you can take to be the eyes on, hands off leader that is going to help your organization grow. First, of course, is hire great people and custom fit what they do to their PROM archetype. You've already told me how critical that is. Second is build a diverse team. Both diversity, both in terms of how people look, but also how people think and act. So, combine the physical diversity and the cognitive diversity of the PROM archetype, and then you've got a robust, diverse team. Inspire them to contribute their very best to your team's success because you're custom fitting their roles to their superpowers. Clarify the what and most importantly, the why. Gain buy into the why. And then people will amaze you with their ingenuity of how they accomplish the goals that you give them. Leave the how to them. And finally, have their backs. Take responsibility for what happens and fails to happen in their organization. Pass the credit, take the blame, let them know that you've got their backs and hold them accountable for doing the right thing. Because when somebody strays off outside the boundaries, they're no longer doing the right thing. That's when punishment or sanction or whatever comes into play. But there are lots of ways to hold people accountable for results and values, and some of that is in the after action reviews and the coaching sessions that you have with them, should have with them about every quarter or so. So those steps are going to help you be the kind of eyes on, hands off leader that gets extraordinary results. Okay, so shifts in action. Vikram Singh, founder of Red Cedar Strategies, is looking for a way to scale his highly successful business and bring out the best in the people around him. And so this is exactly what Vikram did. He was in our reemergence mastery class. He's like, look, hey, this thing is already paid for itself because of the clarity and focus that I've gotten on the what. I know the what, I know the why. And once I know the what and the why, figuring out the how is easy. And it's already helped him create over $60,000 in new opportunities. And ultimately, he's going to be doubling his monthly revenue from about 20K to about 40K a month. I mean, it's just awesome. Okay, so the 5 shifts that we've discussed: single ideal to 4 archetypes, assign seats to align seats, custom fitting jobs to people's archetypes, going from being a cloner to being a coach. So you help people be their best and most authentic selves. Moving from the what and the how to creating to the what and creating buy-in with the why. And finally, going from hands-on to being eyes on, hands off. Okay, so aha, I'm going to show you a set of pictures. Let me know which picture best describes your biggest aha from this presentation so far. Which picture best describes your biggest aha? So just let us know the picture and why you selected that picture. So which is your biggest aha so far? Type it in the chat room, picture and why you picked it. Picture and why you picked it in the chat room. And Nicole, just let me know when you start seeing stuff.
Yeah, Chris, Barbara Jean says that she picked the puzzle piece. This brought a lot together. Tom, the gears, all the different archetypes and strengths working together without supervision. Robert, the bicycle, the parts are fitting together and forward motion is achievable. And Jeff, the Tinker Toy, is putting it all together.
Nice. Awesome. And just keep populating the chat room with those and we will, we'll check them out. But this is one of our favorite exercises here because it really helps things sink in and make those creative connections. Okay, so I'm not sure why you showed up today to this masterclass. Perhaps you're leading an organization or aspire to be a leader. You want to boost your personal performance, that of your team. Maybe you're dealing with a lot of turbulence and uncertainty and are looking for ways to navigate your team through that. Some of you want to promote smart initiative and risk taking. I mean, we don't want to promote just any initiative and risk taking because it could be a colossal and expensive waste of time. We want to promote smart initiative and risk taking. Perhaps you are just tired of the same old lame old jargon and hype that doesn't help you implement anything. And probably all of you who showed up today want to be the kind of leader that people are proud to follow, who inspires people as best. When you look at the last 100 days, what we've been through in the last 100 days, I mean, it's actually extraordinary. The outbreak of the COVID pandemic, the economic shutdown, then after George Floyd's killing, you had the protests against racial injustice. John Lewis, rest in peace. So, civil rights activist pictured there. Then you had the efforts to begin to reopen and live with the virus a bit. And then in some ways, there's like a second wave or new outbreaks in the South and West. Now we've got a presidential election that might be pretty divisive. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of turbulence and uncertainty in the world. One of my clients said, I feel like in all of this, I am looking at the top of a mountain and I'm trying to figure out how I get up to the top of the mountain and I'm wearing flip-flops. And I said, what a great analogy. And the first thing we need to do is we need to get you the right route and the right kit so you get up that mountain safely in the shortest possible path. And the way you do that is this. I mean, it all starts at step one, an awareness of, hey, these are some problems I want to solve and the intention to solve it. The knowledge transfer that gives you the tools to solve those problems. But then the key is implementation. You've got to actually implement. Step three, implement in action plans and action steps, the changes that you want to make to solve the problems that you want to solve, to get to where you want to go, the accountability to keep on track. And then finally, through that process, creates the new habits that create sustainable growth that gets you to the top of that mountain. All right, and there are two basic ways to get there. One is do it yourself. People, can do it yourself, and sometimes you'll get to the top of that mountain in the fastest and cheapest and most effective way possible. Others find themselves in a very different part of the landscape. Or you can have a guide that knows the route, that knows how to get up there, that can help make sure that you've got the right equipment and the right route and the right training to get you to where you need to be. Okay, so of course, I'd love to help you do that as effectively as possible. So what I'm offering everybody on this masterclass is just a free strategy call. There's no sales, no BS, nothing like that. Nicole, if you could put this link into the chat room, that would be awesome. But this is the link to schedule a call, and it's just a free strategy call. Here's exactly what we're going to do on this strategy call. First, we're going to talk about your professional journey. Just real quick, hey, give me a sketch of your professional journey that got you to this point. Second is we're going to talk about the goals that you want to accomplish. Third is the obstacles and roadblocks that you are facing that you want to overcome. I'm going to give you 2 to 3 action items that'll help you overcome those obstacles, power through those roadblocks, and get to your goals. No sales, no BS, no bait and switch. It's just all about that. Whether we decide, that there's a follow-on conversation or not. So this strategy call, my thanks to you for being on this, all about delivering action items for you. So once you click on that link, it's going to take you to a scheduling, a schedule. Pick the time that works for you. As you can see, I've cleared the decks for the next 3 days for you. So schedule that time that works for you. Then you're going to have, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. Hey, what are your top 3 goals? What are the obstacles that you're facing? What do you want to get out of this call? And in that way, we can make sure that 30 minutes that we've got is as focused, and value providing for you as possible. Then you're going to click the little blue button on the bottom, complete appointment, and boom, you are on my calendar, and we are going to have a conversation that that helps you get to your goals. Okay, so I would like to leave the rest of the time for your questions. That's my dog Daisy, and that's the way she looks at me when she's got questions. So what are your questions? Go ahead and type your questions into the chat room, and I look forward to answering them. Go ahead and type your questions in the chat room. And I can now see the chat room, which is great. Mashid, yes, I will send you a copy of the ebook.
Yeah, he and Mary Ann were having some connectivity issues earlier, but they got that resolved. But let them know that we would be sending the recording and book later.
Pete, I love the lock, opening up a different way to approach leadership. Very cool. Any questions at all? I'll pause for those. Okay, well, if there are no questions, it's been a pleasure having you on this masterclass, and I hope that you have gotten some actionable takeaways that you can implement right now to help you inspire people to contribute their best to your team's success. And I look forward to having having you do the scheduling the calls. I'll send a follow-up email with the recording and and also the link to schedule a call. But have a wonderful week, and I look forward to talking with you all very soon.